Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian, and today we're going to do a book review. A little bit of a change. I've been meaning to do more of these and just haven't had the chance. So today we're going to take a look at two different books, both written by Leonardo Antaris. These are Star Firearms and Astra Firearms, two of the principal firearms making companies in Spain. I think a lot of people underestimate the amount of cool and interesting stuff that was coming out of the Spanish gun industry in the 20th century. A lot of people are familiar with the Ruby, World War I, 1920s era pistol, which doesn't have a great reputation, but actually isn't that bad. Just got way overproduced because of demand from World War I. And then a lot of people are familiar with things like 1911 knockoffs by Llama and Star. But there's really much more to it than that. So, for example, Spanish pistols run the gamut from early, weird auto-loading pistols like the Campogiro here, to quite late pistols like, let's see, like this Star 30. This was manufactured, I believe, in the 1980s. Star and Astra both were companies that were in business right until the mid to late 1990s, 1997 and 1998, respectively. So they were making, well, this is one of the double-stack, double-action, all-steel pistols, and these guns were used in World War I, like the Ruby. They were used in World War II. This is a Bulgarian contract Star Model B. Saw use in World War II. The Germans bought some of these and used them as well. Let's see. We have blowback designs like the Astra 400 here. This one is actually even more interesting because it was manufactured during the Spanish Civil War by a bunch of anarchists. This pistol is named the Francisco Ascaso, named after a Spanish anarchist martyr from the early fighting in Barcelona. So there's cool, interesting historical niches like that. Let's see, what else do we have here? Star, some of the early Stars that did in fact copy a lot of the Model 1911 mechanics, but they did things a little differently. So the grip is different, the safeties are different, disassembly is different, especially when you get a little more developed from this Model 1922 to the Model B Super, which has a much simpler takedown than a 1911. Pretty cool. There's a lot of stuff going on in the Spanish pistol industry, and most people don't know it. One of the reasons people don't know it is because not many people have any information on Spanish pistols, and that is where these two books come in. These are absolute treasure troves of information on guns like that. Everything from the very earliest guns made by both of these companies to literally the very last ones they made before the companies went out of business. I do want to point out a little bit of background on the Spanish arms industry. It was primarily focused in a region called Eibar, which had a lot of good steel. It had been a blacksmithing industry before firearms, and then turned to firearms when they were invented. And the number of shops making pistols was seen as a contributing factor to the decline of the industry's reputation worldwide. So there were just too many people trying to make too many guns, undercutting each other, quality wasn't great. And around the Spanish Civil War, well, just after the Spanish Civil War, the government decided to fix that. And at the same time, to maybe keep tighter control on who was making guns. And so they consolidated the industry and dictated exactly what companies were actually allowed to still exist. And the result was three major companies: Star, Astra, and Llama. So Mr. Antaris hasn't written a book on Llama. I guess they're a bit less interesting, but he does have ones covering Star and Astra, and they really cover everything. I mentioned the Campogiro, guns like that at the very early end of the 20th century. He talks about the guns that were competing for Spanish approval, for Spanish military service. For example, the competitors for the Campogiro, competitors for the Astra 400, which was adopted as a Spanish military pistol in 1921. In fact, interestingly, Star and Astra were both competing for that contract. So you can see guns like this, very similar to the Star Model 1920, which competed against the Astra 400. The Army ended up adopting the Astra. The Spanish Guardia Civil, like the National Police Force, ended up adopting the Star. And these two would go back and forth. They'd both be used until ultimately, after World War II, the Army changed their mind and adopted a Star themselves as well. You'll see that all the way through. I'm sure you're familiar with guns like there's a funny series of them: the Star Mega Star, the Star Ultra Star, the Star Fire Star. What are all of those things? Well, Antaris book covers all of those, and in a pretty awesome level of detail. Histories of how these guns were developed, what context they were developed in, and then quite a lot of tabular data as well. Serial number ranges, production dates, all of the main variations of the guns. You know, were they made with different barrel lengths? Were they made with different magazine capacities and different calibers? When you get into things like, you know, the Star Model A, Model B pistols, you also have the ones that most people around, you know, in the US have never heard of. The Star, the Ds, the Ms, the Ps. These are the pistols in other calibers and with other features like detachable shoulder stocks. Some of them are select fire. They're made for export markets. There's a ton of detail to this whole family of pistols that most people just don't know about, and it's all covered really well in these two books. Now, in addition to just having data, they also have really good glossy photographs. As a result, they're not super cheap books. In fact, they're somewhat expensive books, but I tell you what, both of these are another example of the type of specialty book that's written by someone who's a passionate expert about a specific subject. They go through all the work to create these books more because they love the subject matter than because they're ever going to make money on them. As a result, the books are expensive, they're published in relatively small numbers, and once that first printing is gone, those books are gone. That definitely applies to these two. Once these are sold out, that's it. They're never getting printed again. They're far too expensive to make, and there's far too small of an audience. So if you're interested right now already in Stars, if you were interested in them before you click this video, you definitely owe it to yourself to pick up copies of both of these. Whether it's military or commercial guns, I should also mention there are sections in here on things like Astra's revolvers, their shotguns, a lot of the commercial production guns that are the sort of things I don't normally talk about because I'm much more interested in the military side. But both of those, military and commercial, are well covered in these books. Things like gold damascene guns, incredibly fancy stuff like this. There are lots of examples of these photographed in the book. And these, I mean, this picture is exactly the sort of thing that you get in the main pages. The Astra book is just over 800 pages. The Star book is, I believe, 630 pages. They're indexed. They're definitive. They're fantastic resources. So, like I said, if you're interested in these guns before you click the video, you really need to have these two books in your library. And if just watching this and looking at this variety, and I'm only scratching the surface here with some of these Spanish guns that I have, if that makes you curious and interested, well, you know what? These pistols aren't very expensive because most people don't know about them. If you're looking for a cool subject matter to collect, you know what? Spanish pistols are easy. Most people don't know or don't care. Pick up one or both of the books, figure out, take a look through, figure out which ones you're most interested in, which look the coolest. Start collecting because I'll tell you what, you'll have a market all to yourself pretty much. Or you would have until I posted this video. Sorry guys. At any rate, I have links in the description text below where you can find both of these books, and you will not go wrong buying them. These are, I'll say, I've done videos on a number of these pistols and some other ones, like, in fact, I have a video on the Astra 900 that's coming up shortly, and these books are an instrumental reference source for me when I'm doing videos on Spanish pistols. Do yourselves a favor, check them out yourself. Thanks for watching.